Hello, and welcome to RBME 101 Reflection Week. I'm joined this week by colleagues from the Centre for Learning on Evaluation and Results, CLEAR. I'll introduce you to them just a little later, but Reflection Week, falling between the weeks 4 and 5 of the course, is an opportunity for you, RBME 101 students, to take a breather, to review course material and to consolidate your learning to date. So this week, we're not adding any new material, but we will take the opportunity to respond to some of the questions that you've raised within the discussion forums. We've also posted some supplementary readings that may be of interest to those of you who'd like to explore debates around some of the questions in greater depth. If you remember, we asked you to identify what you felt were interesting and pressing questions around results-based monitoring and evaluation. Our community TAs then reviewed your suggestions, consolidated them, and asked you to vote for the top 5. As a result of that process, we've been able to rank the questions and select 5 that you, as course participants, felt were most pertinent. Now that the process is complete, I'm going to ask our community TA, Linda Kumalo, who's also a junior researcher within the CLEAR Legislative Oversight Programme, to tell us a little bit more about the questions that were selected. Linda, tell us a little bit more about the questions that students posed within the discussion forums.
Thank you, Kieran. We received interesting questions from the students. Thank you all for your participation. Interestingly, the questions that we received related more to management-related issues as opposed to technical issues. The questions that we received ranged from students wanting to understand how they could use monitoring and evaluation to improve performance within their organizations, the difference between results-based management and results-based monitoring and evaluation. Students also wanted to know how they could best move from focusing on outputs to focusing on impacts and outcomes in projects. They also wanted to know how they could best measure outcomes and impacts. Lastly, students were interested in knowing how leadership could be more involved and could have a more shared vision to projects. This is to ensure that projects are more sustainable.
Thanks, Linda, for the hard work in sifting through and selecting those questions. I'm going to start by putting one of the questions to Aisha Ali. Aisha is a development practitioner and M&E specialist with over 8 years' experience in policy research and monitoring and evaluation work in fragile and post-conflict environments. Aisha, the field of results-based management is replete with jargon that can be quite confusing to the newcomer. A number of students have asked us to outline the difference between results-based management, RBM, and results-based monitoring and evaluation. What do these terms mean and how do they relate to one another?
Thank you, Kieran. So results-based management is the overall process of defining results using management tools in finance, HR, accountability, and M&E systems to better optimize program efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability. So results-based M&E is a subcomponent of results-based management. According to the World Bank text, Making M&E Work, M&E, monitoring and evaluation that is a powerful tool that can be used to improve the way governments and other institutions achieve results. So just as institutions require financial and HR systems, M&E systems are important in answering the question, so what? So what if you've built 20 schools or drilled 50 boreholes? What do these actions translate into in terms of tangible impact?
Thanks, Aisha. I'm sure that will help clear up any confusion around the definition of those terms for students. To answer our next question, I'm going to turn to Dr. Lewis Ndlovu. Lewis is a senior technical advisor here at the CLEAR Centre in Johannesburg. He has had extensive experience in carrying out evaluations across a range of African countries, and more recently has been working with the City of Johannesburg Metropolitan Municipality to help embed monitoring and evaluation practice across the City Council and their 15 municipal-owned entities. Lewis, the course to date has focused on principles and concepts that underpin the results-based approach, and while we will look at how we can institutionalise monitoring and evaluation within institutions in week 7, students are already asking about approaches, tools and techniques that might be used to improve M&E performance within an organisation. Based on your own experience as an M&E practitioner and your current work with Johannesburg City Council, what advice can you give them?
Thank you very much, Karen. Yes, it is a very common question. The way I would approach that question is to say, let's consider an organization as a system that is interrelated, parts working together towards a common goal. And if we divide that system into subcomponents, into 3 subcomponents, perhaps then we can say we are able to make interventions to improve at each of those subcomponents. The 3 subcomponents that I propose are based on one of the books that is recommended, which looks at 12 components of a functioning M&E system. Let's consider the first component, which is people, partnerships, and planning. And the second component would be collection, capturing, and verifying data. So that deals with the data systems. And the third one is utilization of data. So if you look at the first one on people, partnerships, and planning, you are looking at the capacity of the people, the technical capacity, the structures and organizational alignment, so that the alignment and the structure allows the institution to function properly and use M&E systems. Then you have to have people with the skills, plans, M&E plans, not only existing plans, you want plans that are costed. Let's move on to the second subcomponent or subsystem, which has to do with the data. This is very difficult because it also needs technical skills. People who are going to collect the data, look at issues of quality. So we're dealing with periodic surveys, we're dealing with data management systems, databases, and research. Those areas require high-level technical skills. While I'm talking about data, it is very clear that we do mostly in our institutions monitoring. That's very straightforward. It is required by legislation, and sometimes we just do it as a matter of compliance. We found that very much the case in the city of Johannesburg, where as much as over half of the time of certain levels of technical people were spending their time doing monitoring. So yes, that may be necessary, but think about it, it means that there is little time to do evaluation for programs. And finally, looking at the third component, subcomponent, we are looking at the utilization of information. That's very important. No use in having qualified people, having data systems, and collecting all the data and writing the reports, and then they are not utilized. So in conclusion, I would say that if you want to make an improvement to make your M&E system function, just divide it into smaller components as I have indicated, and then put interventions at those levels.
Thanks, Lewis. That's really helpful. A related question that students have asked, and again, one that you might speak to given your recent experience, is how can managers and M&E practitioners be empowered to focus on results at outcome and impact level in addition to activity and output level? What advice have we got for students there?
Yes, thank you. Again, it's natural to think of activities and outputs for most of our work because it is easy to look at an activity and see the result at that level. However, when we look at how that results translates further into answering the so what question, we find that many of us don't go that far. When we're asking the question, so what, when we're looking at the results at higher levels, then we're talking of the outcomes and impact. Plans which governments are making, the national development plans in many African countries, start with the outcome and impact levels. However, and I should say that also is part of what is required by legislation. However, the translation of those plans to achieve those outcomes and the impact is not always very clear how that is achieved. And that's one of the difficulties. So I would say you need a legislative framework, you need policy frameworks that allow measurement to be done at outcome and impact levels. That's the first thing. Secondly, you need to have training for people to be in a position to make measurement at those levels. So it requires some culture, evaluation culture, for us to think differently and always ask, beyond my activities and outputs, what does that lead to? And at institutional level, that should be possible. There are some other difficulties which are related to definition of roles and responsibilities at institutions where the M&E functions are not clearly defined structurally, and also with the people who are working in those functions. Finally, let me talk about the issue of the data that's collected. Some skepticism exists about the credibility of data that is collected for outcome and impact. That's because the way the data is collected, gathered, the quality and utilization is not creditable in many instances, and there is lack of trust in the data. We saw that with the city of Johannesburg, where some of the subcommittees were not trusting even the data that is gathered, and it was supposed to help them to make decisions. So you need to have quality data, and that means training for people with skills. Some organizations have tried issues of building incentives so that M&E officers are empowered. But I've not seen where it works. But I know that there are examples that are cited from Asia and Latin America. So in short, I think we'll have to build an evaluation culture which finally helps us to think at the levels of outcomes and impact.
Thanks, Lewis. And it's worth pointing out that the text that both Lewis and Aisha referred to, Making Evaluation Systems Work, is available on the Reflection Week supplementary reading list for those of you that are interested in exploring the 12 components in greater depth. To answer our fourth question, I'm going to turn to CLEAR Monitoring and Evaluation Officer, Izetu Mandla-Lize. Izetu is a long-standing member within the CLEAR Legislative Oversight Team. She's worked within the NGO sector as a researcher, as well as lecturing in sustainable development, the political economy of development, and of course, monitoring and evaluation. Izetu, the results-based approach is all very well in theory, but the reality is that many projects are poorly designed, they focus on short-term results, make poor use of resources, and fail to achieve impact. Many students have asked how we might encourage a shared vision emanating from leadership for a more robust-based, results-based approach that leads ultimately to more sustainable projects. What advice can we give them?
Thank you so much, Kieran. What I think is important for any organization to understand when it comes to creating a shared vision amongst the leadership when it comes to monitoring and evaluation is to understand that within the leadership are different individuals with different beliefs, with different ideologies, and with a different set of values. And these, as opposed to other more easier factors to influence, such as logistical and technical aspects, these usually take time and these are usually more complex to influence. Hence the need for advocacy and communication strategies. And these need to be established and designed and defined from onset. What am I referring to when I'm talking about advocacy? Advocacy simply refers to appropriate tools to sensitize, to educate, to influence, and to change behavior and values. And I believe that it's important for every organization to understand its context and to be able to understand the types of advocacy tools that are relevant to its context. The same applies to communication. It's important for every organization to understand its target audience and therefore capitalize on the available communication tools to further share the information that needs to be shared amongst the leadership within the organization. And I think that with proper advocacy and communication mechanisms, an organization will be able to create a positive M&E culture, which is important for sustainable projects. And what I mean by a positive M&E culture, I mean a shared set of values with regards to the function and the importance of M&E. For example, its importance and the fact that it's not just a policing tool, but it's actually important and helpful for learning and for the designing of better projects in future.
Thanks, Izetu. Those are really useful and helpful insights. The final question that we'll tackle today concerns the cost of monitoring and evaluating results at outcome and impact level. A number of you have pointed out that outcome and impact level results can be costly to measure. Is there any way around this? Well, it's certainly true that outcome and impact results can be costly to measure. This is particularly true if we adopt what we term an experimental approach to program design, where rather like the techniques used in clinical trials within the pharmaceutical industry, we must carry out a baseline, that's to establish the status quo before the project begins, set up control groups, groups of people who will not be involved in the project, as well as target groups, those people who are involved in the project. If we want to be truly rigorous, we even have to assign people to our control and target groups at random in order to statistically prove that the results at outcome and impact level can be attributed to our intervention. We'll talk more about that in week 7. All of these arrangements are undeniably costly, and in fact they must be put in place even before our project starts. As you can imagine, this adds up to a significant investment in the evaluation of a program over and above that which we are investing in the program itself. It's expensive. In response to this challenge, Howard White from 3IE, that's an organization that's promoting the use of randomized control trials in evaluation, he points out that the cost of running these rigorous forms of outcome and impact evaluation is small in comparison to the billions of dollars that are wasted each year on programs and projects that don't work, or for which we have no reliable means to prove that they do work. A question of priorities, I suppose. We've posted some information on the organisation 3IE and their rationale for greater use of randomised control tests within outcome and impact evaluation as part of the supplementary reading list. Well, that's it for Reflection Week. Remember, the supplementary reading resources are there to satisfy your curiosity. They're not required readings for the course. So take some time to review the material we've covered so far. Have a go at answering any exercises that you haven't yet completed. And if you have questions on the course content, why not use the discussion forum to seek answers from your fellow students? I look forward to seeing you in class next week.